Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Swedenborg and Life. Today we're going to be looking at the families in the afterlife and whether or not they exist. Our topics are going to be the following. We're going to be asking, do people live as families in the afterlife? What happens with our families? And then we're going to have some time to discuss something nobody wonders about. So I divided our topic today into those first two questions because they would be my main questions on the subject. First, is there any such thing as a family on in this life? We have families because we're born from people and related to people through shared DNA. But does that apply in the spirit as well? Also, families are somewhat based on dependency. Older people take care of younger people. Live forever in an afterlife, wouldn't everybody reach autonomy? And then would we really need to live in such close association? Second, if there are family groups in the afterlife, are they our families? I mean, do we take our families with us? What if we want to? What if we don't want to? Lots of good questions, so let's take a look. Stay tuned. Okay, wait. We don't have our intro? Are we still live? Okay. This is a very first... If you're just watching the show for the first time, you're getting a very, very special performance. Because normally... And I'll try to act out the intro as we go here. The intro goes like this. Ding, 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 and it just says Swedenborg and Life. And then we say, all right, welcome back. So pretend that that's all happened. Hey, welcome back to the show, Swedenborg and Life. Really glad to have you guys with us. This is a special episode because we didn't have our intro. My name is Curtis, and I'm with the Swedenborg Foundation. That works. We're a nonprofit group that tries to get Swedenborg's works and ideas out into the conversation. And my guests today are Reverend Kurt Asplundh and Elmo Acton. Thank you guys so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us.
All right, cool. So I hope you still trust me now, even though we messed up the beginning. In post, we'll put it in. It'll be like super seamless. So we're going to discuss a few things about what I did talk about, though. And we're going to start by asking in segment 1, do people live as families in the afterlife? But we don't want it to just be us that are talking about it because we want to hear from you. So get your questions in. The second half of the show is going to be a live question and answer period. So start thinking about those now and put them in as you have them, wherever you are. If you're hanging out on YouTube, Facebook, wherever, you just use our comment section. So let's take a look at segment 1. Do people live as families in the afterlife? Okay, all right, so do people live... I get a kick out of that picture that we had. It's just like, I don't know if you guys saw, it's just this very old-timey portrait of a family, like classic family. So do those things happen in the next world? I mean, do all the dynamics of family, like what touches people's lives more than that, Do we have them in the life to come? Would life be the same without it? So let's take a look at what Swedenborg wrote. Our first quote is from Heaven and Hell, number 47. People of similar quality all recognize each other just the way people in this world recognize their neighbors and relatives and friends, even though they may never have seen each other before. This happens because the only relationships and kinships and friendships in the other life are spiritual ones, and are therefore matters of love and faith. I have often been allowed to see this when I was in the spirit, and therefore out of the body and in the company of angels. Then some of them looked to me as though I had known them from infancy, while others seemed totally unfamiliar. The ones who looked as though I had known them from infancy were the ones who were in a state like that of my own spirit, while the unfamiliar ones were in dissimilar states. And then if that one wasn't long enough, we have another one from Secrets of Heaven, 685. The ties that connect people in the next life are remarkable. They are like family ties on earth, in that some acknowledge others as parents, as children, as siblings, as blood relatives, and as more distant connections. Their love for one another reflects these different levels of relationship. The varieties come in unlimited number. The way they are communicated and perceived is so exquisite that it cannot be described. People there pay no attention at all to who was whose parent, child, blood relative, or connection on earth. They do not care what a person's outer identity was like, whether the individual had importance or wealth, and so on. They look only at differences in mutual love and in faith, and at what kind of capacity for welcoming love and faith a person has received from the Lord while living in the world. So, I just wanted to read as much as I possibly could before I let you guys get a single word in. It seems like what he's describing there, Kurt, is that there are these family connections in the afterlife, but they have a different sort of underlying essence than the ones we have here are.
Sure, they're not biological, they are spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
One thing, I want to go back to your intro.
Yeah.
You mentioned you made the point about, family relationships are relationships of dependency.
Right.
And so I said, well, that's one way of looking at it. I was the sixth of 7 children, and so I had a bunch of older siblings, and I can remember sitting at the dinner table with my family as a kid, loving to make my older siblings laugh, like bringing something to them. So it's not they're taking care of me; it's I'm trying to bring something to you,
right.
Which I think that's what heaven is. What can I bring to you?
Right.
I mean, I'm 50. My older brother's getting close to 60. I love to make him laugh.
So it stayed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I think that's a lot of what heaven's about. What can I, it's a little deeper than just making somebody laugh. But what can I bring to you?
So there's these bonds, not just like, oh yeah, I need somebody to feed me and take care of me, but there's like, what can I offer back?
What rich experience can I have with these people that I have this kinship, this connection with?
Yeah, and so that's happening on the desire to make someone happy. I mean, that's a spiritual trait.
Yes.
It's not just like we have the same hair color.
Not dictated by genetics, but
all right.
Spiritual kinship.
So there's something else there. Emil, did you have thoughts on the whole thing?
Well, I'd like to think, actually earlier I was talking to Kurt, and he was talking about how he tells his class, what is heaven all about? It's about your loves. I like to see this as a lesson also that the world isn't just about the connections we have on this earth. It's really about the connections we have on this earth that are deep within inside of us. Our love's here too. We exist in heaven right now.
Yep.
And so when we die, our body fades away, the society we enter into is going to be a society that's surrounding us right now where we are.
Yeah, we talked on earlier episodes of the show about kind of the physics of the spiritual world that Swedenborg describes as this a distance, like affinity creates distance, and you can be in a room, you guys are in a room with me, you might be thinking, man, I have nothing in common with this guy, but in heaven there's, in the spiritual world there's sort of what you have in common, the similarities draw people together, and they're kind of an organizing principle for these communities, and it can be the same sort of way.
We're all Swedenborg nerds here.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, we live in the same fishbowl. So, and it's interesting that he says that there are these sort of spiritually based connections, but that people actually label them in similar. Like there's like you'd think like, okay, I have a bunch of people I get along with, and we all get along the same. But in a family, you were saying like there's a younger siblings, older siblings. That's different than a parent to a child. That's different than you to your younger siblings. So he's saying that there are these same kind of nuanced connections there.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
It is, yeah.
So our job is to say interesting things to you guys at home. We already got through our first segment. So we can continue that conversation through our second segment. So let's get to topic number 2. So if I was watching that first segment, and I was hearing like, oh, there's these spiritual sort of connections that bring you together. If I was out there, I'd be saying, what is that? What about my mom and dad? Like, are we connected? Are we not? Oh, my husband or wife, are we connected? Are we not? My brother, I don't really like to make my siblings laugh. Am I going to see them on the?
Right.
So what happens with our families in particular? Let's take a look at a couple quotes, then I want to hear your guys' thoughts. So these are nice and short. Heaven and Hell 427. We are still together in that world being the spiritual world as Swedenborg is describing it, and can talk to anyone when we want to friends and acquaintances from our physical life, especially husbands and wives, and also brothers and sisters. I've seen a father talking with his 6 sons and recognizing them. I've seen many other people with their relatives and friends. And then a short one from Swedenborg's book, Married Love, number 205. I have heard from angels that those who lived in most ancient times are at this day living in heaven, house by house, family by family, nation by nation, in like manner as they had lived on earth, with scarcely anyone missing from a household. So, and he mentions people from ancient times. There's sort of what's he talking about there? There's kind of a connotation of the ancient church kind of thing. Would you say a few words about that?
Sure. Well, Swedenborg has this idea of maybe a prehistoric golden age, where it just sounds like things were kind of working out, so an inclination, a tendency, a genetic disposition to goodness would be something that would be passed down, and so it sounds like their families are staying pretty intact.
Yeah,
Right.
because there you have this sort of when things are going good, and I think if you're watching this and you feel this really tight bond with your family, you're like, yeah, I'd love to be.
Yeah, those are pretty cozy passages.
Yeah. And if you're on the other side, you're like, wait, I don't want to, like, they can visit twice a year, but I don't have to still have them as family. So it seems like
They don't have to.
it seems like when things are, what that's saying to me is when things are going well, that bond's keeping people together, but it's not a forced thing. Elmo,
I think that's like, I think he's talking as an example of a more utopian kind of a reality that happened. And so he's showing us what could happen in the future too, when we all become wonderful and amazing people.
Yeah.
I think the core thing to think about here still is that we're driven by our loves, and so when we're in the other world, our families or our societies are all people that have like loves of ours from
Not necessarily genetically determined
Right.
on Earth. Yeah.
But it's a win-win situation, which is so cool, because he's saying you're going to be in a society that you're going to fit in with. You're going to love these people. They're going to come naturally to you. You're going to have a useful, wonderful life.
Yeah.
And then when you want to see Uncle Bill or Aunt Greta or something like that, because that's part of your love. That's one of your many, many loves. That's underneath your core one, that you'll get to do that too. So he's saying, yeah, you can still see old family if you love them.
Yep. Thought brings presence.
Right.
He talks about that. And if you read Swedenborg's spiritual diary or the journal he kept of his experiences, he's always bumping into people that he knows on his sort of spiritual or astral travels.
Right.
Even if they aren't similar to him at all, or they have hostile feelings for him, he can still bump into him and see him. So, you guys, we have 30 more seconds.
I was going to say something.
Okay, go.
I was going to talk about my experience teaching some of this stuff in high school, which I was doing for 10 years a while ago. And in some ways, Swedenborg's language can sound pretty stark. And so these high school students were kind of left with the impression, it was sort of like sounding like families are almost making so strongly. It's a spiritual connection. It's not a biological genetic connection, that it almost was sounding like our families ripped apart. So that was troubling to the kids. And that's, where heaven is where what you love is real. Yeah. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. Yeah. It's a win-win.
Luckily for me, he wrote so starkly so I can have a show explaining, no, it's not as bad as you think. And you had thoughts too?
Oh yeah, I was going to go into the whole thing about attachments. So how this is really cool, if we have time, is that so modern psychology has this concept of attachment theory, and it has to do with secure attachments, anxious attachments, these kind of things. And how this really cool, I think this really in a cool way applies, is that if we have a secure attachment with the Lord, those things we've attached ourselves to other people on this earth, the more we focus on that attachment to the Lord and that secure attachment, that's the true relationship we run from. Now that we think of that, now imagine the attachments that we can have in the other world or this world from that, and that's going to compound on our love.
It seems like relationships are more healthy the less needy that you are, and the God that Swedenborg is describing, there's all kinds of this is the source of life. This is where you get and if the more connected you are to that, the less you're trying to get those things out of your other relationships, and then you have this sort of platform. Like if you feel like the wealth of love you can get from God, that spills over. And I know that when things are going well for me, in my ego version of it, it's like, oh, of course, everyone, I'm so nice to everyone, But there's this sort of more real connection.
I've seen an incredible video about this on YouTube.
Oh yeah, yep. Subscribe now. Okay, let's get into our third topic now. So I didn't want this show to be like too helpful or too right on, so I wanted to include a little something that people have not been clamoring for. And this is just happening. I was doing my research in Swedenborg to try to find these passages on family, and I just came across this very interesting one that I had probably read before at some point, but it struck me as new. So this is from Secrets of Heaven 9:17. In a regenerate person, virtues and truths, or the attributes of charity and so the attributes of faith, relate to each other in such a way that they all regard each other as blood relatives and kin. That is to say, they regard each other as belonging to families that spring from the same stock or the same progenitor. The situation resembles that in heaven. This is how the Lord organizes our positive qualities and true ideas. So to start it off, Elmo, what does regenerate mean? What's he talking about there?
Regenerate is an ongoing process of you becoming closer and closer to the Lord. Your conjunction with the Lord, that secure attachment I was talking about earlier, which I was using a modern psychology word for,
yes,
is really, in Swedenborg's words, the love of the Lord, that conjunction with Him. And the more we go through processes of repentance and other things,
spiritual growth.
Yes, exactly. We become in stages of regeneration.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the regenerate person, and so in the regenerate person, there's this weird thing going on where there's like families of truth. Right. What does that mean?
Well, I was just noticing that it said in a regenerate person, because we were talking about this passage earlier, and I was thinking about listening to a podcast just this afternoon about football, American football, and there was a woman whose dad had played in the NFL, and when her son was born, the first thing she thought of is he's going to play football. Went through a process of the kid playing, and then started to see some of the darker side of the game. Including the lifelong consequential injuries that people have, and talking about I think football's good for kids, and I think football's this sort of disintegrated
conflict.
And she's got to figure that out. She's got to figure out what her life's about a lot more than whether her kid plays football or not. But there's a little piece of something to figure out. Regenerate means integrated, means fully realized. So there's something there that she needs to get together that she hasn't gotten together yet.
Yes.
A kinship within herself.
Yeah, and one of the most fascinating things about Swedenborg, I feel like, is his detailed description of what's going on in the soul or the psyche, and that it's as structured and as real and as nuanced as what goes on in the body, and that God, this process you were talking about, regeneration, that's this organization process that is just as amazing as everything you learn about how cells work and DNA and all that kind of stuff, and that part of it is this organization of these principles, and that those have to get in some kind of right form so we can get to this state of heaven or enlightenment or whatever you want to call it. So it's just interesting to think that he's saying those are grouped like families.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That was another thing I was noticing about it too, is the whole idea of an organizing principle. It's an organized thing. Order, design, just is such a great theme in Swedenborg, and it's a sort of this incredible way that things can just come together.
God is in divine order. And so just that is got to be how it is, because you look at the world, it's all structured and it's all ordered. So whatever's behind that is.
If you look at the world, it can often appear to be.
Depending on what part you look at. Yeah.
And I think if you look at it right, yes.
Yeah.
You have one of your intros or one of your videos, you have that cool vision of that person who's kind of like all these little people everywhere and stuff like that.
Yep.
I think what this kind of talks to is that kind of geekier side of Swedenborg, where it's talking about how life is all good and truth, and this concept of all the things we love and all the things that we think that are really amazing, they're like the little atoms everywhere. Yeah. So heaven's the same way in that concept. So if you think about like what it lies within you, your goods and your truths, your loves, these are make you up. And now imagine if your body disappears and you're just made up, instead of atoms, you're made up of things of the Lord, which are these things. That's what's like the real matrixy real stuff,
Yeah, so that's something to put in your mental landscape, and we want to hear how confusing was all of this. Is there anything we didn't answer? Get your questions and comments in, because we're going to answer them on the other side of this quick video break. All right, we're back. I was going to try to explain to our guests what we're doing right now, but I didn't have time. So we'll just get right to it. All of you out there, remember, ask your questions now, and we'll try to answer as many as we can. Okay, our first one comes from YouTube. This is from Gundren Sonja. I watch your videos from Denmark. Hey, thanks for watching, and I would like to know what Swedenborg means writing that we receive the capacity of loving from the Lord. Most of my empathy came from the fact of being hurt by other people. Is that also a kind of capacity that we receive from the Lord? So that's a great. Let's just start it off like deep and heavy, man. Like that. That's a great sort of technical and also emotional question, because you're wondering, okay, so Swedenborg often says things like, we can only love from God, we can only live from God. But if you're living life, it seems like, well, the experiences that really give me these feelings of love and empathy are often painful and confusing. So is that God?
Sure.
So I'll offer a few thoughts, and then I'll bounce it to you guys. I would say, our capacities come from God. This is almost a philosophical thing. He says all life, we are. He calls us vessels or life receivers. That even our ability to move and think, it all comes from God, and so does the capacity to experience love in the first place. As far as how love is introduced into us, Swedenborg talks a lot about actually relatively painful experiences being the way that our sort of life is shaken up enough that we're willing to accept deeper things. We had a whole show about temptations or spiritual struggles, so those are so even though that's not God poking you with a stick, if you're shooken up a little bit, you're more willing to kind of understand where other people are coming from. So those are a few of my first thoughts. And Elmo, did you have more?
Yeah, I think that love comes from the Lord. So pain is the absence of love. Mm-hmm. So I think it's nice to mention here that pain and suffering and hurt comes from other people. Yeah. But the Lord sets it up really in a really amazing system where when we get hurt, if we learn something from that, we see Him in our expression throughout that, from that pain. Right. And so I see maybe that's where what he's talking about is that, if he can see that from the painful things in his life, he has become he or she become a more full person, that I think that's where he's seeing the Lord in his life. And that is the capacity of love, is to, even in the worst situations, to still feel the Lord's there and can pull me out. Yeah. The Lord is good to all, and His tender mercies are over all His works. That is a scriptural formula that I lean on a lot myself. Yeah. And it sounds like the strength to come to a point where you can be empathic towards another, having been through something hard, that's from the Lord. Yeah. But the Lord's good to all, and His tender mercies are over all His works. Yeah. And if you look at, I often think about Jesus Christ and the way that His life went, it wasn't all easy, but there must have been something good in that, So, and definitely take a look at our episode that's called "The Purpose of Spiritual Struggles," because we really get into that there. Okay, let's get to our next one. Thanks very much for that question. This is from X Jones on YouTube. What about those that are missing from households? So, we're thinking about family, and who's in your family, who's not. I mean, there's all, family goes across an entire spectrum on this planet, from family, everything's gone really well from them, to just, there's all kinds of situations. So where's the connection? I mean, it seems like there always is some sort of connection, even if I don't really want to meet my birth parents. Okay, yes, I do. That there's something there, and I would imagine there's not like a universal, here's the law about everybody. It would be a case-by-case kind of basis. So what do you guys think? Well, just looking at that question, too, that the word, I wasn't sure I understood it, but the word missing is there. And that I think that word missing is suggesting that something's not pulled together. Something maybe needs fixing that isn't fixed yet. I'm thinking, I don't know if that's really what, so my understanding of everything Swedenborg reports about the spiritual world in heaven is that opportunities are given to work those things out, to bring those things together. Right. He talks about married partners who are not, they're not for each other, but they need to maybe spend some time together to really get that, to really see that. Yeah, definitely. And I would think, that there's better opportunity. Swedenborg talks about people in the afterlife being able to speak their feelings much more clearly, be able to think about things, and there's maybe barriers you couldn't get across in this life that would be easier to bridge then. But Elmo. I think this truth we're dealing with here, this concept, is also the Lord telling you not to worry. He's saying it's okay. Yep. So, you may have problems with your parents. You may not even know who they are. Yeah. But it's going to be okay, because it's the things that are inside of you, who you really are, that make you. And that's your real family. If you've got friends, if you've got somebody around you that understands you on this earth too, that's a external form of heaven. It's someone who understands you and can spend time with you. So don't lay so much pressure on, I need this kind of person or that kind of person. It's really about finding yourself and what,
Yeah, and don't lay a lot of pressure on what we read and say here. I mean, like, we're sort of poking around, people might be poking around, wait, is this fair? Is that so? God is love and wisdom. I mean, so whatever God is architecting into life, it's not like we're going to be able to look at it and be like, oh, that's really unfair, or this is not giving me the chance. That God is on our side and like pulling for us. So I do find that, yeah, some of it's just trust, and that
and if your viewers feel they need to be in a heaven far distant from our own, that's fine. God bless them.
And we'll visit. Though you can tune in.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get to the next one. This is from Rich on YouTube. What does Swedenborg say on relationships with family if there were problems? Do we get to understand them on a spiritual level when we meet them on the other side? One thing I really like to do is read near-death experiences, because Swedenborg has so much information, but he goes into so many different directions that some things that a lot of people would ask, he'll sort of skip over, or he'll mention it briefly without a lot of emotional detail or something like that. So I think about near-death experiences and things like the life review, if you guys have ever heard of that, like where people go through their whole lives. Oh, and Swedenborg does make reference to seeing scenes from your lives, but you understand, oh, this is why this happened, this is how I made this person feel. And I know that Swedenborg describes almost communal feelings, that feelings can be shared. We did a video about this a while ago. So I would think that there's a lot more capacity to have clear communication about things, and that would include understanding. And he says that, and sorry if I take up everything there is to say about this, but things keep coming. I'm like, oh, that's so good. I got to say this. I got to say this.
Go.
That you can look at, angels can look at someone's hand and see everything about the person. Yeah. And so, here we're like, why are they acting like that? What's making them, oh, I didn't know when they were young this happened. But it's not like that there. That there's this instant like, oh, I get why people are this. So there's some of mine.
And you might have said it all. I was good. You mentioned near-death experiences, which I think is a good thing to bring up. When I was doing that high school teaching job, we read a book called Closer to the Light, which is anecdotal stories of children's near-death experiences. Right. Just incredibly good harmony between the material in that book and what Swedenborg reports about the spiritual world. And just so impressive about the ground of understanding that the spiritual world is. It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even if sometimes it's hard to bring that understanding back, it seems like that's the consistent report. That's a place of understanding and love.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, I think that, if this person's asking if in the other world can they fix bonds that were broken here, I think if the easy answer to that is if it was meant to be bonded, it will. And if it wasn't, you won't care about it in the other world. Yeah. So if you have a relationship here that dissolved and was unfortunate, you might not really care about that one in the next world. But if you do, you'll get that chance to see that person and to at least say hi. And
yeah. Well, I don't. When you hear near-death experiences, nobody comes back unsatisfied. Like they see how things were put together, and even if you're saying they can't quite describe how they're like, it's okay, it's gonna be okay. And I would hear people talking about, I didn't know how could there be a God with this kind of suffering. But when you see it laid out, whatever it's like, it's this is okay. We're cool. We're good. So I like that note. Let's end on that note. We're gonna we have one more. Let's get to it. We don't want to leave anybody hanging. So this is Useless Mail on YouTube. I found this scripture in Ephesians a while back, so I had to make sure to make this show. For this reason, I kneel before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth derives its name. So let's end on that note. You guys want to say anything about it?
I could talk towards it.
Go for it.
I think what that is kind of hitting towards too is a lot of stuff in the New Testament about putting God over all family. But there's some scary stuff in the New Testament too, where it says brother will kill brother, mother will.
Right.
All this really interesting stuff. And what all this is about, I think, is what we're talking about today, is the concepts of that. Your family isn't what necessarily makes you up. It's your loves. And the Lord is the one who loves you the most and wants to provide for you for the most. So if you look towards him, that's how you'll truly bond those relationships with your family and be a better person. It's not by looking at your family, it's by looking at the Lord.
Sure.
Well, that also is making me think of just in teaching Bible stories to sixth graders. And, Elijah calls Elisha. And Elisha, it's the same thing. Let me go home and kiss my parents goodbye. And Elijah doesn't really say that's a bad idea. But he says something, I can't remember exactly what it is right now, but it's sort of the message is, you need to understand what we're doing here. We're going out in the countryside and speaking the Lord's word, which it's a nice, talking to 12-year-old kids about it too, that he wants to go home and say goodbye to his parents. And Elijah didn't say, don't do that, that's bad, but don't forget, we got some work to do.
Yeah. If we were at the beginning of our show, we could just start right now talking about, Swedenborg's correspondence symbolism in the Bible, and that when Jesus is talking about family, this is like we were saying that, everything's organized in us like families. He's often speaking about those families, but we just don't have the time. So you guys are going to have to tune in another week, and we are okay. We're only going to take one more question. I keep trying to go, but then somebody asks one. Some say we choose our families before we are born. If so, can we be put in a family that needs us more than we need them? Yeah, and I have no idea what goes on pre-birth, but it does make me think of when you said, I still love making my brothers laugh. That it's not all about like, oh, we need to be cared for and fed. There's a giving back too.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've learned a lot about life from growing up in the family I grew up in. Good, bad, indifferent. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. So, Elmo?
Well, interestingly, he was kind of touching on concepts of predestination, I think, where like you're already set up with a family in heaven, which is a complicated thought because there's no predestination, but the Lord knows everything. So that's a really hard one to grasp, but it's the kind of concept. So you are going to end up somewhere with a family that loves and shares your likes. Yeah. And the Lord knows that already, but it doesn't mean that you're predestined for it. It's still created by you and created by your loves. It's just,
Yeah, and he's talking about, are we with families that we would learn the most from? And the answer is yes, because, as Swedenborg describes it, God's divine providence is organizing everything in life to try to create us, regenerate us, like we were talking in the beginning. So situations, everything is to let us regenerate as much as possible.
Right.
So there's got to be that in family too or something. So there are the definitive answers to all the questions. You can just take the transcript of this and write the authoritative text on everything. Okay, thank you guys so much. It's always fun hearing those, and if we didn't get to them live, you can still write them in and we'll try to get to them throughout the week. We're going to take a quick break and we'll come back to close with our Correspondences meditation. Yeah. All right, so we're here and we've been talking a lot and thinking a lot, and I like to try to mix in a little bit of more experiential kind of feeling sort of thing. So we have this segment we call Correspondences, and what that is based on this principle. I talked about biblical correspondences a second ago on the other side of that. Correspondence is something that symbolizes something. The way I understand it is Swedenborg is talking about objects that you can see out in the world being images or things receptive of deeper spiritual realities. And today we want to look at fire. And so Swedenborg says that fire corresponds to love. And you had been talking before, Elmo, about how good and truth or love, and these are sort of they're what we think we are, but they're also sort of these metaphysical things that make us up. Swedenborg says love is our life, but it also is this kind of driving, motivating, attractive force that we think of it as. So, and fire is a correspondence of that. So that would mean like what fire does in the world, love can do in a like it warms us, it lets us eat, all kinds of stuff. There's a positive and a negative side to it, but we're going to focus on the positive side here. So do you guys have any thoughts on fire as Swedenborg describes it before I show these images?
One thing I was thinking when you were talking was there's a passage somewhere in Swedenborg where he's talking about how you pick a baby up out of a crib or something like that, and just the warmth of this little thing, but where's that coming from? And Swedenborg is unequivocal. That's coming from heaven. Love, fire is love, is vital heat. Yeah. And he just mentions holding an infant as a
Yeah.
It's heat and that light coming off of that heat too, which is pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
Oh yeah, and my dog is full of love. Okay, so with all of that in your mind, so just kind of the game is like this. You have those thoughts. There's hopefully some new thoughts about fire now in your mind, and just take a look at these pictures of it and just thinking that, oh, this is an image of that, and just see how it feels. And of course, a real fire is even cooler than that. So I do sometimes like just sit and look at a log that's burning and like see there's such different kinds of shapes and different kinds of fire in there and the coals underneath. What's it all mean? I don't know, something. Hopefully this was worth your time coming out. We really appreciate all the questions and thoughts and comments. If you guys want to help this show continue and spread, consider making a donation to the Swedenborg Foundation. Open up the description of this video. There's a link there. It's all tax deductible, nonprofit. And that will help us out a lot. Thank you. Thanks to both of you for coming on the show. Really appreciate it, and we hope to have you guys back on soon.
Thanks, Curtis.
All right, and we'll see the rest of you next week, same time.